A Penniless Pilgrim, written and read by Jeremy Rees. Episode 2. Swansea. One perfect day in the city that gave the world Dylan Thomas, cockle stalls, and an indelible talent for reinventing itself. The tourist board would like you to know that Swansea is the gateway to the Gower Peninsula, one of Britain's most spectacular stretches of coastline. What they're less eager to advertise is that the gateway itself, the city, the lived-in, salt-aired, slightly battered city, is rather extraordinary on its own terms, and yet you can spend an entire deeply satisfying day here without spending a single penny. I know, because I did that on a Thursday in May, which teetered on the cusp between drab wintry drizzle and glorious sunshine. A fitting metaphor for the city itself. Swansea, Abertawe in Welsh, meaning mouth of the Tawe, the name of the river that runs through it, sits at the southern edge of Wales like a city that has been roughed up by history and emerged from the experience with its sense of humour entirely intact. It was bombed flat in 1941. It was deindustrialised in the 1980s. It lost its Woolworths, like everybody else, in 2008, and since then many of the big names that dominated British high streets in the latter half of the 20th century have followed, slowly but surely. At the end of May this year, the Marks & Spencer store on Swansea's Oxford Street will close its doors for the final time after 69 years. And yet, here it still is. Defiant, curious, and, on the right morning, genuinely beautiful. The Waterfront Museum, a copper city, remembers itself. What used to be the bustling industrial South Dock with its adjacent fish market is now the rather less bustling Swansea Marina, with luxury apartments and moorings for leisure yachts. The same imposing building has looked over both incarnations, and the messy transients that came between. The National Waterfront Museum now occupies a building that was once Swansea Victoria Railway Station. Free to enter, as all Welsh national museums are, a policy so civilised it should be written into international law. It tells the story of Wales's industrial revolution with the conviction of a nation that still can't quite believe what it pulled off. For most of the 19th century, Swansea was the copper capital of the world. The lower Swansea Valley belched and roared and smelt terrible and produced roughly 60% of the world's copper. The museum handles this legacy with wit and without sentimentality. There is machinery that looks capable of eating you. There are oral histories from men and women who speak about the steelworks with a matter-of-fact pride that will ambush you somewhere around the second exhibit and not let go. Swansea Sands, the beach that surprises everyone. Step outside the Waterfront Museum and walk west along the seafront, and there it is. 5 miles of sand, sweeping in an extravagant arc towards the Mumbles headland. The whole scene looking improbably Mediterranean, until a cloud comes over and reminds you where you are. Swansea Bay is, by any reasonable measure, a magnificent urban beach. It is also, and this is the part visitors consistently fail to anticipate, enormous. You arrive expecting something modest, and find something that makes you want to phone people. The Welsh writer Marcel Williams put it well. He said, "The sea here has a particular quality of light in the morning, pewter shot through with silver, that painters have been trying and largely failing to capture for 3 centuries. Walk along the promenade. Watch the dog walkers, the joggers with the faraway expressions of people working through personal crises, the elderly couples who sit on benches facing the water with the contented stillness of people who have been doing this for 40 years and intend to continue." The Dylan Thomas Centre, raging against every machine. From the seafront, cut back into the city, along the River Tower, towards Somerset Place, where the Dylan Thomas Centre waits with a permanently slightly wounded air of a place that knows its subject died young and badly in New York, and would very much like you to feel appropriately bad about this. Dylan Thomas, poet, broadcaster, professional drinker, author of Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night and Under Milkwood, born in Swansea in 1914, dead in Manhattan in 1953 at the age of 39. He is the city's most famous and most complicated export. The centre dedicated to his memory is free, thoughtfully curated, and contains enough of his handwriting to make you feel guilty about every half-formed thought you've ever called a poem. There is a reconstruction of a New York bar. There are recordings of that extraordinary voice, which sounds like God attempting a Welsh accent, and largely succeeding. Swansea's relationship with Thomas is somewhere between pride and exasperation. He famously called the city an ugly, lovely town, a description so perfectly balanced that it's been used to describe Swansea in approximately every piece of writing about the place since 1950, including this one, just now, unavoidably. Swansea Minster. 13 figures and a table. Before heading uphill, make a detour that will cost you nothing and stay with you considerably longer than you expect. Swansea Minster, also known as the Collegiate Church of St. Mary with Holy Trinity, though it carries its minster status with becoming modesty, stands near the market with the quiet authority of a building that has been watching the city through everything. The boom, the bombs, the regeneration schemes, the planning disasters. It has seen off all of them. The rector is on hand today with a team of volunteers to show visitors around and share their wealth of combined knowledge of a very storied building. Its origins reach back to the 12th century, though much of what stands today is substantially the result of rebuilding after the Blitz reduced much of central Swansea to rubble in 3 nights of February 1941. There is something worth sitting with in that fact. The bombing that flattened the city spared enough of the church's bones that it could be rebuilt, restored, made whole again. Swansea has form in resurrection. The artist Peter Barnes has created for the Minster an extraordinary sculpture of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. 13 figures sit and stand around a long table. These are not serene, luminous beings arranged for aesthetic effect. The drama of the moment rendered not in stained-glassed softness, but in something rawer and more demanding. For it is composed of over 50,000 individual computer keyboard keys. Stand in front of it for a while. Let your eyes move from figure to figure. There is Judas somewhere in that company, and there is Christ, and there are 10 others who are mostly just people trying to understand what the evening means. Which is to say, they are all of us, rendered in 3 dimensions in a medieval church, free to visit on any day the doors are open. It is one of the most quietly remarkable things in Swansea. Most of the city walks past it without knowing it exists. High Street. Diamonds in the rough. Swansea's High Street is not a finished project. It is an argument in progress, and it's all the more interesting for that. There's a surprising amount of art. The Elysium Gallery does what the best small art galleries do. It shows you work that you didn't know you needed to see and charges you nothing for the privilege. The Volcano Theatre, housed in a huge disused supermarket, which in addition to being a theatre company creating original work, also houses an art house cinema. Charges apply for performances, but the venue hosts many free activities. For the scientifically minded, there is the Oriole Science Centre, a grant and donation-funded charity hub, open at weekends. That said, none of these were open on the day of my visit, so do check their websites first if you want to see them for yourself. Descend into High Street and you will find what urban regeneration looks like in the middle of happening, which is to say, patchy, surprising, occasionally brilliant, and frequently inexplicable in both directions, which in a street of vaping shops and shuttered windows feels almost radical. The Labour Hall is the kind of building that stops you mid-stride. An Edwardian temple to collective action, it has been decaying behind boards now for decades, with sprouting buddleia the only sign of new life. It is very large. It has magnificent bones. Its future, like all the best arguments, remains unresolved. It originally opened in April 1914 as the Elysium Cinema and Dock Workers Hall, designed by Ward and Ward, architects of the Strand, London. The building featured a 900-seat auditorium, cast iron seating and a large stage. The cinema closed in 1960 and the building transitioned into being a bingo club. The Labour Club side of the building continued to operate as a private members club until it closed in the late 1990s. While several regeneration projects have been pitched, the structure currently remains derelict and continues to draw the attention of urban explorers, documenting its peeling paint, collapsed ceilings, and untouched vintage bingo boards. The Palace Theatre, further along the High Street, was like that too until recently. Built in 1888, it's had more lives than a theatrical cat. Music hall, theatre, cinema, bingo hall, disco. The young feet of Charlie Chaplin performed clog dancing on it in 1899, and in 1960 its spotlights lit up Anthony Hopkins for his first public performance. It survived the Nazi bombings in 1941 and was saved from dereliction in 1952 by an actress who became an early star of Coronation Street. When the 1980s arrived, the palace became a nightclub and safe space for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. It finally closed after a fire in the late 1990s, and like the Labour Hall, it was left to decay for decades until its rebirth in 2024 as a business hub. The garden that grew from a graveyard and became something extraordinary. In the heart of Swansea's High Street, a once forgotten burial ground has been transformed into a living act of hospitality, tended by volunteers, open to everyone, and quietly changing the city one visitor at a time. There is a particular kind of urban space that announces itself without fanfare and remains with you long after you have left. Greenhill Gardens, tucked behind the hustle and bustle of High Street, is one of those places. You pass through a gate, the city recedes, and you find yourself standing in something that is simultaneously very old and very new. A heritage garden, carved from what was, not so long ago, a neglected historic graveyard, and what is now, by any honest measure, one of the most quietly remarkable community spaces in Wales. It opened in September 2025. It is free. It is tended almost entirely by volunteers. And it is the project of Matthew's House, an organisation whose stated purpose, unconditional hospitality for the most vulnerable people in Swansea, sounds startlingly radical. The ground behind Greenhill Gardens has absorbed centuries of Swansea. It's the kind of soil that has stories in it, though they are not always easy to read. As a working graveyard, it was, by the mid-20th century, largely overlooked. One of those spaces that cities generate by inattention, neither cared for nor entirely abandoned, simply present and unexamined in the way that old grief tends to become. The transformation that Matthew's House has undertaken here is described carefully and correctly as respectful. The heritage features of the site have been preserved. The flower beds bloom, but the word that keeps returning, walking around the gardens on a bright afternoon with the city humming just beyond the walls, is the word the project itself keeps using. Hospitality, not beautification, not regeneration. Hospitality. The distinction matters enormously. A beautification project improves a space. A hospitality project opens it to people who may not have felt welcome anywhere else. And that is a different undertaking entirely. Matthew's House works with those struggling with homelessness, with mental health, with addiction. Greenhill Gardens is not a separate, prettier project running alongside that work. It's an expression of the same impulse, the conviction that everyone deserves somewhere good to be. The volunteers who tend the gardens understand this. They're not merely gardeners, they are, in the language that Matthew's House has adopted as its own, practitioners of hospitality, which turns out, on closer examination, to be a much older and more demanding vocation than it first appears. Visitors to Greenhill Gardens are invited to follow a self-guided trail through the site, with QR codes placed at intervals through the grounds. Scan one with your phone and a recording begins. A voice speaking about the history, the heritage, the stories embedded in this particular patch of Swansea earth. It's a light technology deployed in the service of something quite weighty: the recovery of memory. The insistence that the past is not inert, but present and available to anyone who stops to listen. The recordings are not the cheerful chirp of a Heritage Centre audio guide. They are quieter, more considered, the kind of voice that treats you as someone capable of sitting with complicated things, which, it turns out, most people are, if given the chance. The gardens are just one aspect of the Matthews House project, an enterprise so extraordinarily inspiring it deserves a pilgrimage of its own. In time, I hope to return here for precisely that purpose. Swansea's High Street is, at present, a street in the middle of working out what it wants to be. There are magnificent old buildings and empty shop fronts. There are signs of creative energy and signs of neglect, sometimes in the same eye line. It is, in other words, a street that needs exactly what Greenhill Gardens provides: evidence that care is possible, that the long view is worth taking, that the right response to a neglected space is not demolition, but attention. Swansea Market, the city's true cathedral. End where you could have started and will probably want to return. Swansea Market, which is the largest indoor market in Wales and one of the great civic spaces of these islands. It's housed in a building of post-war municipal confidence. Big, light, slightly weathered, utterly unpretentious, and it contains, without exaggeration, more of life than most places 10 times its size. The cockles. You must understand the cockles, Swansea cockles, gathered from the Gower estuary, sold by women who have been selling cockles in this market for as long as anyone can remember, served in small tubs with vinegar. They are one of the genuine pleasures of British food, if you like that kind of thing. And personally, I don't. Those that do can stand at the seafood stalls and eat cockles and watch the market move around them and feel, for a moment, entirely located in a real place among real people doing real things. There are lava bread stalls, cheese stalls, butchers, bakers, haberdashers, stalls selling things whose purpose you can't immediately determine and whose traders will explain with cheerful patience if asked. There are flowers. There is noise, the productive, sociable noise of a place where commerce and community have been conducting the same conversation for generations. Indeed, Dylan Thomas did say it best. An ugly, lovely town, and the only honest thing to add all these decades later is that the lovely part keeps finding new ways to be true, and that you can discover several of them without spending a penny on any given Thursday in any weather this small, sea-facing city cares to arrange. The National Waterfront Museum, Oystermouth Road. Entry is free, it's open daily, allow 90 minutes minimum, although 2 hours is more honest. The Dylan Thomas Centre is open from 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. from Wednesday to Sunday. Entry is free. Swansea Minster is open 7 days a week and is free. Greenhill Gardens, High Street, free entry, open to the public, self-guided trails with QR audio points throughout the site. Bring your phone and earphones. Managed by Matthew's House. No booking required. A market is free to enter and free to browse. And it will cost you something to leave without buying anything, because wanting things is the natural response to Swansea Market. Budget accordingly.